Now we have a presentation on business transformation with SAP Signavio by Mr. Bhargav Vasudevarao, Senior Solution Advisor. This session will cover how SAP Signavio can drive process improvement. Please welcome Mr. Bhargav Vasudevarao. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Bhargav. I'm part of SAP Business Transformation Management portfolio. So what we are going to talk about this afternoon after lunch is the focus on business transformation as a priority in any organization. So what exactly is business transformation management and how SAP's BTM portfolio enables organizations to start adopting the technologies to help in the transformation journey. So the first question is, why do companies transform, right? So most companies are already heavily invested in terms of digitization. They have invested significantly in digital technologies, automation, and so on. So why do they do this? Why do they invest? So there are some internal drivers which drive them to adopt digital technologies. So for example, a company which starts out as a startup, for example, it scales up slowly over a period of time, adopts technologies, but at some stage you reach a ceiling where growing beyond that is limited by the legacy which you started with. So you want to break out of those internal barriers and grow further, right? So that's the first internal driven drivers. The second is market driven drivers. So what happens is, again, in the market you have new regulations coming up, new competitors coming up. So for example, there could be a large organization well established in the economy, in the market, in a particular business, but suddenly a new market player enters and is going to disrupt the whole market for this particular entrenched player. So market-driven drivers to transformation. And the third one is, of course, technology-driven drivers. So Gen AI is the talk of the town. So the drivers which make you or force you to adopt these new technologies and take you forward to the next level. And what Gartner has predicted or forecasted is almost $5.26 trillion of money being spent on digital transformation in 2025. But what are some of the challenges which these organizations face in digital transformation, in business transformation? Why do they fail? So when we talk about why, one of the biggest thing is they are always delayed. Transformation is quite delayed. The results, therefore, are not in sync with what should have been in terms of what was originally planned, right? So 46% of transformation projects are not completed on time, exceed budgets, invest in the wrong technology, which is again a very key topic, right? So you do an internal evaluation, you do a market evaluation of a particular technology, but that technology may not be the right fit for purpose, fit for your organization. It may be the best of breed for a particular in that market space, but is it fit for your organization's requirements? The necessity of agility is very important. So 59% believe AI will impact transformation, but so far only 35% of organizations who have participated in this have an AI governance policy. Now all these are leading to failure of transformation, failure of business transformation. The purpose with which the transformation was initially triggered is no longer achieved. The value is not realized at the end of the transformation. But that is because organizations think that transformation is a project. Transformation, if you think of it as a one-time activity, you start from A to B and that's it. You close the project and go back to a status quo. That is not really what transformation actually means, right? So transformation is a capability which needs to be embedded into the organization, and it needs to be done on a continuous basis. So of course, you will have initiatives as part of your transformation, initiatives as part of your roadmap to go from A to B, B to C, C to D, and so on. But it is a never-ending requirement for any organization to ensure that all those drivers which we spoke about, internal, market-driven, and technology-driven, are continuously adopted and continuously generate value for your organization. Now, coming to SAP's vision of business transformation. SAP believes that there are 4 primary dimensions for any organization to take care of in terms of transformation. Process basically means that how are you actually executing your activities in your organization, understanding what those processes are, improving that, bringing in efficiency in your organization. The applications which enable these processes, right? Applications and IT which enable these processes, and people on the top who actually drive the adoption of these processes and applications. And of course, process, application, and people generate a lot of underlying data. Use that data to make your transformations successful. When we talk about processes, the first step is to understand what are your processes that are executed in your organization. The ability to discover what are these processes, analyze these processes. So when we talk about analyzing processes, we are talking about, in traditionally, what we used to do is, we used to get a management consultant, come into your organization, talk to your users, understand from them how these processes are getting executed, what are the bottlenecks, what are the challenges. But with data being the underlying enabler for all these, analysis is now possible from the data which is available in the applications which run these processes. And then you build the to-be process. So we understand the assets, we build the to-be process, we design the to-be process, and we design the applications which enable the to-be process. And we implement the applications, and then we operate it. So this becomes a full loop. You start from the process, discover, analyze, and design the to-be state, and then design the application which enables that process, implement it, and operate it. And this is a continuous loop. What SAP's vision is to optimize this full loop in terms of discovering and analyzing your process, the faster time to insight, and in terms of implementation also, how can you accelerate the time to adopt and adapt to the new requirements of the organization. And from a people perspective, faster time to change. Because always people, even if you implement a new technology, you implement a new process, they go back to their habits, their old habits, which is, find a loophole in the technology which will allow me to make some changes, which will allow me to, modify how it should be executed, how the process should be executed. Now, how SAP has brought in this business transformation management portfolio. From a process perspective, process improvement perspective, SAP acquired a company in 2021 called Signavio. Signavio was already a large organization. SAP was one of the largest users of Signavio for our own internal process improvement. LeanIX on the right side, which is basically talking about your enterprise architecture and managing the applications. And WalkMe, most recent acquisition, to help the users in adopting these new technologies. So together with Signavio, LeanIX, and WalkMe, we are able to take your organization from business strategy to the execution and do a continuous loop to ensure that it is not a status quo, it doesn't stop at the end, and you continue and continuously monitor, continuously improve your processes and your application. Now, wherever your organization is in terms of your business strategy, for example, we want to understand where are we at the moment and how are we performing, right? So the data-driven approach to understanding and analyzing how your processes are running, how your applications are enabling those processes, and how your users are adopting those processes. So that is where Signavio, LeanIX, and WalkMe come into the play. With Signavio talking about process analysis and mining, data-driven process analysis and mining. Lean IX in terms of mapping your applications to the business capabilities. Ultimately, you want your businesses to adopt the right applications for the right purpose, right? So Lean IX brings in the business capability mapping and the ability to understand your as-is architecture and walk me from a digital adoption. So once you understand the as-is process, you want to design the to-be process. How do we want to work in the future? So identify those bottlenecks, identify those challenges, identify non-compliant behavior, and ensure that your to-be design overcomes all those challenges from your as-is situation. So again, from Signavio, you are able to design these to-be processes in a very collaborative environment. Lean IX is able to help you build your target architecture and build a roadmap. Again, as I said, transformation is not continuous. You have multiple initiatives. How do you plan your initiatives and build up your transformation roadmap using Lean IX? And walk me again in terms of what is the KPI which I want to achieve in terms of user adoption. For example, an application, let's say ERP or S4HANA for that matter, what is the KPI in terms of number of users adopting Fiori? Because Fiori is a very important aspect which S4HANA has brought in. So not many organizations have implemented Fiori. Not many users use Fiori in their day-to-day activities. So how can we set those KPIs in terms of the adoption percentage, for example? And also bring in the capability of benchmarking. That is again very important. While we know how our organization is performing, we also want to know how do we compare in terms of adoption with our peers in the industry. Again, Signavio and WalkMe help you in understanding and bring to you these benchmarks to you from the industry perspective. So for example, we bring data from APQC from an industry benchmark perspective. And we also have our own internal benchmarking capability within Signavio to help you compare your processes with the industry peers. So once we have built the to-be process and the architecture, how do we actually implement it, right? Again, from that perspective, Signavio, Lean IX, and WalkMe help you in terms of implementation to ensure that you have the right initiatives in your organization and you roll it out. Because again, in a large enterprise, in a large organization, you cannot roll out your changes or your process improvements or any technology in one big bang. It is always difficult. Of course, it is possible. But with Signavio and with Lean IX, you can break it down into multiple rollouts and plan those rollouts using these tools. And finally, once you have rolled it out, right, you want to ensure that it is a continuous process. It is not a one-time activity. So what Signavio also helps you in talking about in bringing this value realization perspective. So in the first step, you want to build your as-is and you want to build what is the current value that my processes are bringing to the organization, what are the gaps. But after the rollout of the process improvement initiatives, what is the business benefit that you have actually got at the end of the day? And it becomes a continuous loop again. Now, when we talk about this, right, now we'll go a bit deeper into Signavio as a focus for today. Just a couple of slides here. Signavio has more than 2,500 customers around the world with pre-built business best practices available for multiple industries, including the industries that we are talking about. And we have done an analysis of what is the business value that has been realized by our customers by using Signavio, and we have identified almost $2 billion worth of business benefits that have been realized with Signavio. Now, when we go into Signavio a bit deeper, the core business capability that Signavio brings to your business is the ability to make process analytics much more digestible. Now, in any organization, we have data analytics as one part of it. Data analytics is a key aspect, but the second aspect is also process analytics. So how does process analytics differ from data analytics? With Signavio, you have this ability called plug and play, where you have ready-made process analytics content available. You just have to plug in Signavio to your ERP system or S4HANA system or EWM or Ariba for that matter. And it is going to generate within 24 hours process analytics. I'll show you how process analytics looks like. With that process analytics which is available, we have significant rich out-of-the-box content available within Signavio. And as I was saying, we have external benchmarks also brought in so that you can compare your processes with the industry benchmarks. And once you have the process analytics, you then go into this capability called process mining, which is something which has evolved over the last 15 years. And SAP has been at the forefront, and Signavio acquisition has brought us much higher in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for process mining. So what process mining helps you understand is, what are your process variants, which means, for a particular company code or for a particular plant in your organization, you may be following a particular path of your processes. For example, if you are talking about procure to pay, the PR process to PO approvals, the PR approvals, PO and then release, and then GR, IR, the invoice, receipt, payment, that full cycle, it may be done in different ways in different organizations. For example, the invoice creation may be done manually in one part of the organization. There may be an automation with, for example, OpenText vendor invoice management to create those invoices automatically or through a workflow into the SAP system. Again, from an invoice clearing perspective, some parts of your organization may be doing manually, but you may have payment runs available in another part of your organization, which will make your clearing process much more simpler. So what process mining helps you understand is, what are those variants of processes which are executed in your organization, in your ERP, in your Ariba, in your Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and non-SAP applications also. For example, Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics CRM, all these are also supported in Signavio to do this process mining capability. Now, another big important aspect is, as organizations have used SAP for a very long time, there have been lots of customizations which have been brought in. There have been lots of Z codes which have been brought in over a period of time. And with SAP's strategy to bring all our organizations to the clean core, Signavio is also going to help you in that perspective to understand what are the different transaction codes which are being used in your current ERP system, and how is your process, for example, the cycle time of your process, what are the impacts of those process changes, how are they happening, is all going to come through Signavio. And the most important aspect is, Signavio also helps you in building up your process documentation. Now, typically that is a big challenge. With Signavio Process Intelligence, you are able to do what is called as reverse engineering of your process from your execution systems and generate those BPMN diagrams directly in Signavio. Just a quick view of what Signavio looks like. What I was talking about process analytics at a quick glance, it pre-populates process analytics in the sense of what are the different stages of your process, what is the blockers which are there, what are the bottlenecks which are there in those processes, what is the end-to-end time which is taken for that process, what is the time taken between the different stages. Everything can be analyzed on the click of a button, and we have these process content for almost 110 processes available pre-built out of the box. And once we do the process analytics, this is the variant analysis which I was talking about, where you are able to compare how is my organization executing a process in one plant compared to another plant. So you can do this side-by-side analysis of the process execution and see which one is better, and can we then replicate the best practice within the organization to the other parts of the organization. And once you do that, we have this ability to reverse engineer your processes. As I was saying, you can create this BPMN diagrams and also use these BPMN diagrams to do this process conformance. So once we build this to be process, are we following this process in the right way in the organization? So as you can see in this particular example, while we have defined a to be process, the actual execution is deviating significantly from the to be process. And therefore, there is an opportunity for us to harmonize our processes in the organization. As I was telling you, value accelerators are pre-built content which helps you accelerate this process journey, process analytics and documentation journey in your organization. And of course, AI is also getting embedded into this whole thing. But the purpose of AI here is to optimize your processes, understand from the data, from your process analytics, using generative AI, using Joule for that matter, ask questions on what could be the impact of a particular process change, what is the impact of a KPI, what is the impact on the KPI due to a particular process change, and so on. So far we spoke about Signavio very quickly. LeanIX from an enterprise architecture perspective. As I said, you can build a project roadmap, you can build a transformation roadmap. Again, more than 1,200 customers for LeanIX from almost 10 years. And the next capability is, of course, WalkMe in terms of adoption. So WalkMe is a UI layer which sits on top of the application and analyzes how your users are actually executing the system. So if Signavio is something which will help you look at the data and analyze it, WalkMe is sitting on top of the UI and instantaneously telling you what is the right process that should be executed. So it is sitting on top of it. If the user is going in the wrong direction, it is going to proactively trigger and tell the user that this is the wrong path. Are you trying to do this? And therefore, optimize the processes as they are getting executed. Wanted to talk about a couple of industry examples very quickly. BHP, as for example, they moved from a very regional organization, and they brought into a global shared services organization from a functional perspective. So they were able to, from the shared services perspective, able to eliminate process silos, gain visibility of their processes, do focused transformation on where should you actually do the process improvement, and so on. So they were able to demonstrate internally almost $500 million of value from the improvements which Signavio was able to identify for the users. This is a large chemical company from Japan. Again, they also went in from a global shared services perspective into a single unified organization. And again, Signavio and LeanIX helped them in harmonizing their processes, harmonizing their application landscape. This is a mining company in Australia which used Signavio and LeanIX for their S4HANA implementation, as well as post S4HANA implementation in continuous transformation and optimization. One of the key benefits which this organization realized was from a risk mitigation perspective, because they were able to identify non-compliant behavior in their users. For example, the maverick buying situation, or goods receipt before invoice receipt. So there are multiple non-compliant behavior which the tool was able to identify, and they were able to avoid, mitigate their risks from a compliance perspective. And the last example, this is again a chemical company which looked at fact-based, data-based process improvement, data-based analysis, and ensured that they were able to get almost 630,000 euros worth of improvement from Signavio initiatives. To conclude, Signavio, LeanIX, and WalkMe, these have been acquisitions by SAP in the last 2 to 3 years, but they have been market leaders on their own way in each of their specific categories. Signavio from a process perspective, LeanIX from an enterprise architecture and application portfolio management perspective, and WalkMe from a digital adoption perspective. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present here.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Minesh.
Hi.
I come from JSW. There are 2 questions and one if you want to answer. Are these Z codes also including the interfaces, which is where we build a lot of interfaces across systems, right? So
Correct.
would it also cover the interface part of it when you do a reverse engineering? That is the first question.
Okay.
Second, obviously, a follow-up of that, whether a non-SAP process is also going to be covered by Signavio, because what you showed just now was an SAP flavor of it, the internal parts.
Correct.
And the third one, if you want to answer, is WalkMe available as a service or we have to buy?
Okay. So let me start with the third one. WalkMe is a subscription. It's a software subscription which you can purchase and adopt it in your organization. Okay. Now coming to the first and second in terms of SAP and non-SAP and the interfaces with non-SAP applications. So Signavio as a approach is SAP agnostic. Process mining, process modeling and documentation is SAP agnostic, it is tool agnostic. Fundamentally, it is about how do you create event logs, which are basically steps. So let's say I make a coffee. To make coffee, the first trigger is I need that caffeine boost, for example. That is my trigger. And with that, then I go to the coffee machine. So walking to the coffee machine is one step. Then clicking on the button which says, or before clicking on the button, I need to decide what kind of coffee do I need to make. So each of these are steps in a particular process. And these steps could be SAP or non-SAP, right? And what we only need is the timestamps. When is this being done? And how many times is it being done in the organization by different users? Yeah.
Just one more follow-up question. This question, when I ask on the non-SAP one, is when the first 3 steps of a transaction are done in a non-SAP system.
Correct.
In the first, second, and third transaction, it is not going to connect into SAP.
Correct.
In any which ways.
Correct.
Even after that, it will connect?
So it is about generating that event log. So
within SAP once at least.
Within SAP, it is very straightforward because once we acquired Signavio, we accelerated the generation of event logs within SAP applications, accelerated that. But for a non-SAP application, we do have accelerators for Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or Coupa or few other applications as well. But even if it is not there, we can build those extractors for that event log. So that is not a problem. It is a project activity which can be done.
Thank you.
Any more questions? You can raise your hand. Continue with the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava, for the detailed presentation. The role of SAP Signavio is facilitating business transformation and process optimization is very compelling.